Colleagues, back in 1974, the Senate and the House were very agitated over the increases in the national annual deficit that was adding considerably to the national debt. And they said, we need to do something about this. Now, the levels that they were concerned about at that time seem so small today. The debt to GDP ratio was 23%. Now we're over 100%. The annual deficit was about $6 billion. Now we're about $2 trillion of annual deficit. The total debt was only $1/3 trillion, rather than now $37 trillion. But those increases were seen as such a threat to the future of our nation that Democrats and Republicans together, House members and Senate together, said we have to get this under control. So they created a bill, the 1974 Budget and Impoundment Control Act, to say we can't let this go forward. And here's what it did. First of all, it created a fast track for a special bill called a reconciliation bill that would reduce the deficit and not add more to the debt. The second of all is it says we have to have integrity in numbers. When Republicans are in charge, they tend to increase the deficits and then want to use smoke screens in order to say we're not really doing that. When the Democrats are in charge, same thing. They both wanted to undertake strategies that increase the deficit but pretend they were being fiscally responsible. So they said we must have integrity on the numbers. So we're going to create a new organization. The Congressional Budget Office will be an independent assessor of the cost of any change in law related to programs or related to tax revenue. Honesty and integrity will be the foundation for the debate that takes place in this chamber. Honesty and integrity will be the foundation for the debate that takes place in the House chamber down the hall. Honesty and integrity and numbers will be the foundation for the American people who are following the decision-making that is made by their representatives in the House and Senate. So 2 pillars, a fast track for reducing deficits, a reconciliation bill, and integrity in numbers by using Congressional Budget Office, creating it, and using their numbers to have honesty in the debate of policy and revenue plans. Well, that first pillar, it was destroyed in 1996 by a nuclear option done by the Republican majority who said, you know what? We're going to reinterpret the law. So instead of just using this fast track to reduce the deficit, we're going to also use it for tax policy that will increase the deficit. Well, today, the second pillar of integrity in the numbers is under attack by the Republican majority. They have lost their minds when it comes to fiscal responsibility. They destroy first, a couple decades ago, the fast track dedicated only to deficit reduction, and now they want to destroy the integrity in the accounting for what a tax policy costs or what a program policy costs. All for a simple purpose, and that is they have a plan. And that plan is to put forward a proposal that will cost an additional amount to the debt of $37 trillion over the next 30 years. But they want to tell this chamber that that $37 trillion addition to the debt is actually a $0 addition. They want to tell the American people that that $37 trillion addition to the national debt that's in their plan is actually a $0 addition. Now, I can tell you that a $37 trillion deception, that's not a minor fraud. That is a major fraud. And in the process, they're destroying the integrity not just for this budget cycle, but for every budget cycle to come. The gimmick that they're putting forward to accomplish this diabolical plot is called current policy baseline. And why do they want to pursue this Republican plan? because they want to give tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans and do so not only for a 10-year period, but for a permanent tax breaks into the future. It's not just magic math. I mean, that's almost too nice a name to give to it. It's devastating fraud. Last week, the Treasurer's Office released a report requested by a Republican congressman, by David Schweikert. And he'd asked them, how much will this fraud cost, this Republican plan cost? And CBO laid it out, $37 trillion of additional debt over the next 30 years. It so happens that right now, our current national debt is just shy of $37 trillion. They want to say the debt that's been run up in the last 250 years, next year we're celebrating our 250th year as a nation, the debt that's been run up over this first 250 years, we're going to add that additional amount with one bill, with one vote in this budget cycle. This is fraud on an unparalleled scale. Schweikert then said, quote, anyone that says current policy baseline is the right way to go is engaging in intellectual and economic fraud. It's intellectually lazy. My basic mission in life is just try to create some honest math. Honest math is what Democrats and Republicans together said they were pursuing in 1974. House and Senate together, honest math. Honest math is on the verge of destruction. Chip Roy of Texas said, this plan, referring to the plan, this is fairy dust, and they're full of crap, and I'm going to call them out on it. Anyone who cares about growing deficits and growing debt should call them out on it. $37 trillion in this Republican plan of additional debt, and then adopting a gimmick to tell the American people and this chamber it costs zero. You know, in a free market, businesses need transparency. Transparency so investors can decide if things are going the right direction. The board of directors of a company can change directions. They know that they have to have integrity in their numbers. They know that it's important for their board of directors. They also know it's important for those who buy their stock, the investors. If without honest numbers, they can't make good decisions about where they go. It's the same is true for us in government. If we are not willing to use honest numbers, we can't make good decisions about how we go forward. It's that important. Integrity and honesty in our numbers is that important. That is the debate we need to have, an honest examination. Are you for or against a plan that will add $37 trillion to the debt on top of what additions might otherwise happen under current law? That is the question that we will be facing. You know, this idea of integrity in the numbers, it existed before the 1974 Budget Control Act, but it was so important to have outside numbers that people could rely on, independent numbers, bipartisan numbers, or nonpartisan numbers. They created a whole agency, the Congressional Budget Office, to produce those numbers. It's that essential. So you don't have some think tank giving you pretend numbers from the right or some other think tank giving you pretend numbers from the left. It's that important. You know, this plan, this Republican plan, is like a landlord saying, don't worry, your rent is free over the next 30 years because we're not making any changes to your tenant contract. What a farce, because you know you have to keep paying that rent every single month. $37 trillion being hidden through, of additional debt being hidden through a gimmick. Now, I pointed out this enormous addition to the debt. But what is the purpose? It's to give tax giveaways to the richest Americans. 60% of the additional debt, it goes to the richest 10% in America. Half of that additional debt, 37 trillion. Half of it goes to the richest 5% of Americans. So they're not just running up 37 trillion in additional debt, they're running up 37 additional debt to give the vast majority of it to the already richest Americans. This is a straightforward, simply provision which families lose and billionaires win. They're going to attack the spending on Medicaid, that is health insurance that a good third of America approximately relies on, that veterans rely on, that programs that support those with disabilities rely on. They're going to attack that program for tax giveaways to the richest Americans. They're going to steal from Social Security and make it dysfunctional, and already the lines are starting to pile up and the phones aren't answered in order to give tax breaks to the richest Americans. They are going to betray working families with a tax on health care, housing, and education. Why? To give massive tax breaks to the richest Americans. The situation is clear. Families lose, and billionaires win. Democrats are paying attention. My colleagues, the Republicans, need to pay attention. They have said when they are running that they are for fiscal responsibility. They are for decreasing the deficit. But in fact, their plan increases the deficits massively. An additional $4 trillion over the next 2 years. Additional $37 trillion in debt over the next 30 years to give tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans while slashing programs for ordinary working families to thrive. This is a vast portrayal of Trump's campaign plan. He campaigned on being a champion for families, but that was the campaign. Now he's in office, and the real plan? Families lose, billionaires win. We must reject this gimmick that destroys the integrity of the budgeting process. One pillar, a filibuster-free pathway for deficit reduction, destroyed by my Republican colleagues in 1996. The second pillar, integrity in numbers using an outside independent CBO to give us honest numbers to work with here and for the American people, to be destroyed under the current policy baseline being proposed right now. Be awake. Pay attention and say hell no to this massive fraud on the American people. Thank you, Mr. President.